Lucky you.
36 best
Tuned
holes in
into
golf.
Alternate Shots podcast,
Barney's Army.
where we talk about golf,
Sandy.
poker,
James Bond.
horse racing,
Double.
classic movies.
Zenyatta.
We have no script.
Down the stretch they
And
come.
we are glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
So, Billy Regan, we are thrilled to have back on the Alternate Shots podcast, Billy Harmon. Welcome, Billy.
Master storyteller.
Really
Master storyteller. Hopefully, will tell us some great stories about the Masters.
I have a few, yes.
Yeah.
I have a few.
So, Billy, was this the time that you packed up in Seminole, this kind of time frame, just before the Masters, and the big station wagon is going to go north? Is sort of around this, or was it a little earlier?
Well, I was actually very young when Dad was at Seminole. I have very few memories of it. I know we lived in a little house right off the sixth hole, but I was in the, I think when he left Seminole was 57 maybe, so I would have been 7 years old. So I don't have a lot of memories of Seminole on a personal basis. So my recollection is we flew. That's the first time I ever was on a plane. So I think that's my only recollection of when we went and when we left. So I don't have a lot of Seminole memories, oddly enough. I do know that he left there one year in 1948 to go back to Wingfoot, and he stopped off at a place and won a little tournament called the Masters. I do know that happened, but I wasn't born then either. So,
And he was, we're looking at these pictures of Wingfoot 13, and I guess that's Augusta 13 also?
12.
12. And it occurred to me that I've never played Augusta, but you see on the television and you hear the stories about all the undulations in the greens. Do you think the similarity on that level with the undulations in the Wingfoot greens were helpful to Claude?
Well, I think for sure they were, because I think back then, where'd we have? We would talk about Oakmont, maybe Wingfoot greens there, and Augusta National. So, and as you know, as a lawnmower has improved, I know that when I played Wingfoot last fall, the greens are pretty fast. And then I played Augusta National last fall also. And I would say that the greens that I thought for a set of 18 greens might have been more difficult at Wingfoot than the set of 18 greens at Augusta. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up, that he was used to fast undulating greens. And when you play Wingfoot or Augusta National or an Oakmont, you have to learn what I call the art of two putting, because you could have a 20-footer and the last thought you're thinking about is holing it. You're thinking about figuring out a way to leave it stone dead. So I think it had to be a big
or you'll have another 20-footer.
That's correct. So I think it had to be a big help. I think that's a very good point.
My brother used to love these greens, and there's so many places that on the Wingfoot greens where you literally turn your back on the hole to putt it in some positions. So that I imagine that would be a big help to anybody when they find.
Well, I also think from a golf course management standpoint, Augusta is very interesting in the sense that it lures you into the wrong places. Sometimes, we always say don't short side yourself on an approach shot. Sometimes at Augusta, you're better off short siding yourself than you are having a 30-foot putt from the middle of the green. The 14th hole would be an example, the par 4 with the huge mounds in the front of the green. It's a very easy chip from over the green. It's an impossible putt if you've got a 40-footer from the left of the hole and the pin's in the right. So it kind of lures you into missing in the wrong point, which seemed to be intellectually the right place to go. But you'd find out you could have an easier bunker shot or an easier pitch shot sometimes in a 30 or 40-foot putt. So that's where I think a lot of the local knowledge comes at Augusta. It would be the same at Wingfoot. Sometimes where to miss is more important than where to hit it.
I think Mackenzie was big on that in his design. When he opened Cypress, he couldn't be there, and the reviews came back outstanding. And he first thought was, "What did I do wrong?" And he came to the conclusion that he didn't account for beauty as much as he should have. But he was he espoused that it takes people a long time to learn the right way to play the game before the course before they can appreciate it. That speaks to what you just said.
Well, as you know, and I say this all the time, when I grew up in golf, they didn't have golf communities like they have now. And so the pro had a little bit more responsibility on letting people know when they're ready to go play golf. You know, and they started them in junior clinics. And, you know, I see so many, there's still some people around Wingfoot that started in my dad's junior clinics, you know, and one of the things that you see, they have good grips. They know how to set up to the ball because they started properly.
And they can get out of bunkers.
And yeah, and now with golf communities, which I understand because I work at one, and that mine is high end. So I jokingly say they're selling $5 million hamburgers now. And it's pretty hard to tell somebody that, you know, just joined a club for 150,000 and got a $5 million house that they can't go out and play, but they don't know how to play. And they don't even know the basics. And as Jackie Burke once said, they ruin golf for the golfers. And Jackie said, if you didn't know how to join a yacht club, if you didn't know how to sail, would you join a yacht club? So I think when I was growing up, we learned it starting with 3-foot putts, easy chip shots, pitch shots. I think Dad's theory was if you couldn't put the club on the ball in a chip shot, how are you going to be able to do it with the driver? So I think the game, like you said, you have to know how to play golf, I think, to appreciate really good courses. I really believe that.
I agree with that.
Let me ask you a question, Billy. I was at dinner with a friend and he just picking it up. I said, "Oh, really? Did you get a lesson?" He said, "Yeah." You know, what's the first thing that the pro taught you? Just curious. This is first lesson, never played before. And he went on and on and on about the swing and this and that.
Oh boy.
And I said, "Get another pro." I said, "You need to learn the grip if you've never played before." And I came home, bought him the Hogan book because the first chapter is the grip.
Sure.
Did I do wrong or did I help him?
No, I think you did right. I think that as we all three of us know, changing the grip isn't that easy. So if you start out with a really bad grip and you hit thousands of balls with it, and then you have a pro that teaches the importance of it, immediately the player feels uncomfortable. And that's when I give him the Claude Harmon story. One time he changed my grip and I said, "Well, Daddy, it doesn't feel good." His exact words were, "You appear to be a bright young man." He didn't say I was. And he asked me if I knew what an inanimate object was. And I said, "I think so." And he asked me if the ball was inanimate. And I said, "Yes." Club inanimate? Yes. He said, "Well, those two things don't care about your feelings." That the downswing is not an encounter group between your feelings, and that the ball is going to go pretty much where the club face tells it, and the grip influences the club face dramatically. So I think most players who start off with bad grips will struggle with golf.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. You don't meet too many. I don't meet too many people. You probably do that. Day one, I never, you know, somebody's got some driving range along the road experience, right? Or top golf or whatever, right? This guy had zero.
Yeah,
and another pro.
They got him out there swinging drivers, you know.
Yeah,
they can't put the club on the ball hitting the chip shot. So I think my dad was right about that in the sense that he wanted you to experience putting the club on the ball properly. And if you could hit down on a little chip shot, you could feel compression and things like that. And then you could maybe hit a 30-yard pitch shot. But until you could do those things, there was no reason to you know, go from second grade to senior year at Iona Prep.
So a little exercise that just came to my head. Let's say your dad is on this conversation and we just heard that Justin Thomas called him up. Because Justin Thomas is having, you know, like everybody does. He says, "Can you help me?" What would you think, your dad, what would you say to a pro like that who's obviously top talent, but he's now, and that happened to your dad, right? Gary Player and others would come to see him.
Ricky Fowler's a good example, right?
With Butch now, yeah. Well, we were taught, and I think it was one of the geniuses of Claude Harmon, and it's really kind of blossomed through Butch, is that when you're working with a talented player, the first thing you do is figure out why their swing works. If they wouldn't be good players if their swing was bad. And then be very careful in what you change. And so I'm sure Dad would watch JT hit some balls. He has some unique moves in his swing. I don't think he would touch those unique moves, just as Butch didn't, touch Dustin Johnson's severely bowed left wrist and things like that. And so I think that one of the things I see nowadays in modern day teaching is there's a lot of coaches that are more interested in putting their stamp on things for a kaleidoscope of reasons that Bill and I know pretty well, rather than help the student play better with what they have. Now we're talking about the real talented player. We're not talking about a 36 handicap. They've got to change.
Yeah.
So I think with the really better players, you tweak some things, but very rarely do you have to do a huge major overhaul. And I think if you do, you're inviting a lot of trouble personally. So I don't know exactly what he would tell him. And funny, I had a conversation with Bones about 6 weeks ago. I've never met Justin Thomas, so I don't know him. From Adam, he couldn't pick me out of the lineup. And I said, as a fan, just watching him, I think he has a very interesting issue in the sense that I don't believe in any sense of the world that he's a choker. I said, I think he wants to win so bad. And his desire to win and his desire to be successful is so strong that he has a hard time calming down on Sundays. And he doesn't seem to let the game come to him, let's say, or the round come to him. And Bones agreed. He said he's very hard on himself. And I think a lot of times players, when they get in the hunt, I know it as a caddy, the first few holes you think are the most important thing in the world. And if you make a bogey early, you think it's the end of the world. And the fact of the matter is, everybody you're playing against is also nervous. And so I think it's probably really hard to be patient on Sundays in big tournaments when you have a chance to win. And so I would say a guy like JT, I would look more at his mental makeup than his swing. He has his own swing. It's very upright. He kicks that right knee out on the downswing and the left foot flies off the ground and stuff. I think if you tried to change that, he probably wouldn't break 80.
Right.
Because he's won a lot of tournaments doing that. So it's not like he's never won doing it. So he's won, 2 PGAs and a bunch of other good tournaments. So he's a heck of a player. Maybe puts too much pressure on himself to get to number one.
On the same token, if Scotty Scheffler or John Rahm came to you, do you tell him, get lost, you don't need any of my help?
Well, I think
with that situation,
I have a funny story. My brother Dick was working with Lanny Watkins, and my dad was at Lochinvar where Butch was, and Lochinvar in Houston is very close to the airport. So Lanny flew down, Dick picked him up, and Lochinvar is maybe 10 minutes away. So they went to work at Lochinvar, but Dad was watching Dick give Lanny a lesson. And Dick said it was the most nervous he's ever been, because usually it was we were watching Dad give a good player lesson. And he said Dad sat there for 2 or 3 hours, never said a word, which he thought was nice. And Lanny, when you watched him in person, was unusually good. He wasn't just good, he was unusually good. His ball striking capabilities were really, really very, very impressive. And he had a great session. And they went in for lunch, and Lanny my dad turned to Lanny and he said, I only have 2 things to tell you. And Lanny kind of perked up and he said, first thing I do is make sure I get my clubs and myself to the tee on time. And the second thing I would do is I'd change my route to the bank every Monday so you don't get robbed. What I'm really curious about is, why are you taking lessons from Dick? He said, because your ball comes out like it's delivered from a Remington rifle, and Dick's ball comes out like it's delivered by a seed gun going 360 degrees all over the course. So it took Dad about 3 hours to get the harpoon into Dick after he buttered Lanny up. But his point was, he wouldn't have changed anything with Lanny Watkins' swing, even though it had a lot of individual characteristics, very low hands, incredibly fast tempo. If you ever look at Lanny's swing in slow motion, go to YouTube, very odd impact position with his left arm bent and his left wrist cupped a little bit like Lee Westwood. These were all things that Dad probably would not have looked at in a model swing, but Dad looked at the ball, and the ball liked Lanny's swing, so he wouldn't have changed anything. The players of that ability, they're kind of golfing geniuses, so you don't really cross up the wires of a genius, I don't think.
Oh, this hole here, you know, the one thing I'm like Billy Regan. I've never played Augusta, but I've walked it. Probably walked 10 loops on it when I went in two occasions.
Yeah.
Nicholas always said sort of aim over the bunker, right? No matter where the pin is. Yet, like you said earlier, when usually on the last day they put the pin over on the right, which in my eye is a longer carry,
Yes, it is.
over the water.
It's about 12 or 15 yards longer.
Right. And most amateurs wouldn't think that. They'd say it's 140 to the middle.
Oh, it's
where
an
it's like
easy,
152 to
hole.
that.
Easy hole.
Easy hole. Why don't more people just aim like Nicholas said?
I think that's a good question. And I think Freddie kind of answered it years ago when he got the luckiest break in the history of the Masters, when the ball did not come back down in the water because it had rained that week. And I think there's some truth to it. So they're hitting an 8-iron off a tee. They're the best players in the world. They know they're supposed to go over the middle of that bunker. But they're so gifted, I think, that their mind is always directing the ball and the club to the pin. And unless they have 100% commitment, or as Tiger loves to say, which is a great expression, make a committed swing to a conservative target. It's hard for these guys to shoot away, 40 feet away from a pin with an 8 or 9 iron off a tee. It's just
Not in their buildup.
and then you throw the fact that and don't discount this, they're aware of all the horror stories. They watched them. They watched it happen over the years. And then the wind is really, really strange there. I can remember caddying for Jay. I can't recall who we were with. It was a gusty day, and the guy hit a 7-iron. And it got about halfway there, and the wind switched, and the ball carried up into those azaleas that we're looking at. I don't know. And 40 yards over the green.
Wow.
And so I figured, well, it's not a 9-iron shot, that's for sure. So we went with the same club, and Jay hit the same shot, and halfway there the wind gusted back in our face, and the ball went straight up in the air about halfway there and landed right in the middle of Rays Creek. So I would say the balls ended up 50 or 60 yard difference with a very similar shot. So you add that indecision. And it's true, you get on the 12th tee and you look down to the flag on 11 and it's going to the left, and you look at the flag on 12th green, it's going to the right, and then you throw up the grass and it's coming in your face, and the player says, "What's the wind doing?" You want to go say, "How the hell do I know? No one's figured it out since 1934, Right. So when the wind is blowing, it actually in some respects takes away ability. Because once the ball leaves the club, it's out of your hands. And a lot of times I've seen very good shots end up in the water or well over the green. So it's probably the most magical hole, I would say, in the history of golf, because as you know, 150-yard hole for guys of this talents shouldn't be that hard a hole. But the one thing that you did bring up, Bob, which is true, the green runs at an angle. So let's say the front left is 140, it's 155 to the front right. So if you go to the middle of the green, you can't take enough the club that you would take to go to the right side of the green. So all of these things are swirling around in your head as you're standing on that tee. And it's Sunday at Augusta. So the hole seems to really uncover the humanness of these professional golfers. They're scared to death on the tee. I don't care what they say.
In real time.
I must be thinking about it from the get-go when they get there.
I think when they're driving to the course there's probably a handful of shots that they're thinking about that they're already choking on, as they're having their breakfast. And oddly enough, Wingfoot doesn't really have a hole like that, where Jay Haas, who loves Wingfoot, and is the only guy who made the cut in the 74, 84, 2006 Open and the 97 PGA, so spanning 4 decades, he made cuts. He said the funny thing about Wingfoot is when you're driving to the course, there really isn't one shot that scares you to death. He said maybe the shot on number 3 West, having to hit a shot that, but he said by and large, you don't drive there choking about a certain hole. It just it's a 15-round heavyweight fight or an 18-round heavy, where Augusta has, a handful of shots that you're thinking about having breakfast.
Yeah, they can make or break your day.
What's going to happen? Yeah, what's going to happen?
What would those holes be other than 12, maybe?
A lot of times the hole location, you would think that the second shot on the first hole can be sporty because the wind swirls there. And Augusta has so many places on every hole dictated by pin placements. I'd get fired if I announced it. I'm so tired of them say hole locations for some reason.
They have to say it.
And well judged, some of these new terms. So if the pin was in the front left on number 3 at Augusta, and they're hitting a 60-yard wedge shot, if they come up a foot short and it sucks back down that hill, they might make 6. Back to my point, if you go over the green, the chip is back uphill. So you would never think of missing a green with a 60-yard shot, right? But if you go over the green, the pitch shot or chip shot's actually pretty benign. Short of the green, death. So even though it's a 60-yard shot, if you go over the green on number 1, you're dead. And so Augusta lures you into missing in the wrong places. Obviously, I think 11, 12, 13, 15 is a hole that I don't think they talk about enough, because when I know, Bob, you've been there, but when you stand up on that hill, there's really nothing behind the green.
Right.
So the depth perception is very odd, and it's a little more downhill, I think, than it shows on TV. So you're standing there, and it's like you're hitting to a tabletop. There's some pine trees back there, but, as we look at number 12, you got a hill behind the green, and it's kind of, it's like a glove. But number 15, there's nothing. There's no depth perception. So even when the ball's in the air with a wedge, you're not sure exactly where it's going to come down. And then if the wind is blowing. So I think that is a very underrated shot. And if you go long left, it goes into the water. And if you do go long, maybe 10, 12 yards, you could then chip it back in the water. So all of these things are going through the players' minds. And so there's a lot of indecision that goes on at Augusta. And I think hole locations play a big part of it. The 6th hole, the par 3, when the pin's up on that back tier, that's got to be, unless you've seen that hole like you have, Bob, and I've had to caddy on it and try to pull a club, which I'm basically guessing at. To put a ball on that tier, you got to hit such a good shot. It's unbelievable what a good shot that is. So I think pin placements dictate a lot of what scares the hell out of you at Augusta National.
Is there an elevation change on 6 from the tee?
Oh,
to
big
the green?
time, yeah,
It's
very
lower.
big.
The green's lower, right?
Yes, considerably. And it's another one of those holes when the ball is in the air, you have no idea where it's coming down. You don't know whether to say get up, get down. So there's a lot of awkward shots at Augusta. Actually, I've played there not as much as you might think, maybe 10 times. And it's really not that hard a course, believe it or not. It really isn't. And I played there in November. It was 45 degrees out. Now I'm playing the member tees, but I'm 72 years old and I shot 75. But it's a hard course under tournament conditions to shoot a good score if the greens aren't holding. If the greens are holding, then it's pretty easy to use the slopes and But if the wind is blowing and it's playing fast, boy, you hit a lot of shots that you have no idea where they're coming down when it's in the air. You don't know what to say to them.
A 10 handicap playing the 9th hole, for example, from the member tees. Can the 10 handicap get it down there to hit a short iron, or is the 10 handicap hitting a nut?
I wouldn't say a short iron, but
It looks
he
like
would
a
get
long
it down
shot.
there where it'd be easy to make a bogey.
Yeah. But I was thinking it's like a hybrid into that green, and that's a scary thing for me. That
On
green
9 or 10.
the 9th. And then I would take the
no,
10th
that's a
hole
very
too.
awkward shot. In fact,
Yeah.
when I played there in November, I hit a pretty good drive, and I hit a 6-iron, and the wind was in and left to right. It was like, but the
Wow.
green, the fairway slopes for a slice, the green receives a hook, so you've got all these kind of contradictions going on in your mind. And I was thinking, boy, this is a really hard shot to get it up on the green. So see, the other guys, the pros are hitting wedges. So that's a little bit different. But I'm hitting a 6-iron off a downhill side hill lie without the club head speed to put the ball way up in the air. So I have to hit almost a perfect shot to hit the green. So once again, weather dictates a lot, but that would be a perfect example. That's actually a good call on your part. You have a slice lie, downhill lie to an uphill hook green. So visually, nothing looks in your favor. Now they're hitting wedges, so it's not quite the big a deal. But if they were back there hitting 4, 5, 6-irons, like I said, I would like to see them have to hit hybrids into some of these greens instead of 8 or 9-irons.
Well, yeah, the 83, 88 shooter is going to have a hybrid. Probably going to want to hit a draw, which is going to turn it into a hook. And then you got no chance to hold it, right?
Yeah, so
Or you
now
can
he's
turn
got
it into a ground
aim
ball.
at 20 yards left to the left bunker, and everything's moving away from him. But he can make a bogey if he has golf course management, which he probably doesn't. So
Well, you pointed out the 3rd hole. The 3rd hole is, I think, the difference between Wingfoot, one of the differences, and Augusta. I still think that's a downhill chip from over the 3rd hole. And I said, oh, he hit it over. He's got no chance. He's going to chip it over. But not having played it, even walking it, because you don't get to walk over there.
No, you don't. You do not.
You're not allowed there. So you don't get the appreciation of that. Like you said, sometimes it's better to be long. I think you said.
Well, it breaks quite a bit to the right. So where you're chipping the ball, you're actually chipping it up into a hill. And so it's doable. Down below, Scheffler got very lucky when that ball went in the hole. That thing was going 15, 20 feet from the hole. And so
what happens if that doesn't go in? That's the 3 or 4 person
15,
game.
20 feet, and now he's going to have one of those putts for, the art of 2-putting. Having said that, I thought he had perhaps the greatest short game week I've ever seen in my life that week for 4 days, which is a real compliment to him, because people with great short games, in my view, have to have great nerves. And the nerves will be exposed at Augusta if you don't have a good short game. I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, you can play good, but if that putter doesn't feel good in your hands at Augusta, it's going to be hard to, not only do you have to putt good, but everything has to feel good. I have to feel like I'm putting good. If you don't feel like you're putting good there, boy, that place will eat you alive.
1986, it looked like Jack Nicklaus had a feel for the putter.
Jay, I caddied for Jay that week, and he was paired with Jack on Saturday. And Jay actually played well on Sunday too, not quite as well as Jack. I think he might have shot 66 or 7 and finished 5th. So he had a good Masters. And I think Jack shot 69 on Saturday and Jay shot 71. But they really weren't in, they were in the top 12 or something at that point. I remember Jack hit a 1-iron on 13 on Saturday. It's funny how stupid I can be at times. Pin was over in the right, and he hit this high, towering 1-iron, maybe 6 feet right of the hole. But at that time, you wrongly assumed that Jack was going to always birdie 13 and 15. That was an automatic. And his ball literally landed 1 or 2 feet short of being perfect, and it kicked back in the creek, Ray's Creek. and I don't know why, in my infinite wisdom, I turned to Jay and I said, well, I guess Jack can't go like he used to. And Jay turned to me and he said, well, for one, that was a pretty damn good shot. You know, that wasn't like he exactly choked on that shot. And then 24 hours later, when he won, Jay said to me, he says, please tell me when you think I'm finished. So he had remembered what I had said on 13, you know, and he put it kind of in the back pocket to bring it out at the right time. But he said, please let me know when you think I'm finished.
Oh my goodness.
What was that like? You know, that must have been kind of an intense round to caddy for.
Well, I think there were maybe 2 or 3 times that Jay had a little outside chance on the back nine. I tell a story. I'm not good with dates. Obviously, I know what happened in 1948, and I know 86 because of Nicklaus's win. But there was another year, I think he started out 6 shots back and went out in 31. And he had a beautiful drive on number 10. And he was kind of racing off the tee like Secretariat. And I got thinking, boy, I got to slow him down a little bit here because we got some water to cross coming up. And you know, when you're caddying and you're in the middle of these things, it's not like you have something prepared, because you're human too. And in my case, you know, his uncle won the Masters and my dad won the Masters, so this is a pretty special 2 hours that we're about to encounter. And so I caught up to him, and in my infinite wisdom, as I was going to be Bob Rotella before Bob Rotella, and I said, you know, Jay, when you were a kid and you were at little St. Clair Country Club in Belleville, Illinois, and you were putting on the putting green, waiting for your mom to pick you up, you know, the sun was going down, you had a putt to win the Masters or putt to win the Open. And I said, you know, we're kind of here right now. You know, we just have to make some good decisions and so on and so forth. And Jay said, well, that's a great story, Bill, but the fact of the matter is I'm not on the putting green at St. Clair Country Club in Belleville, and I'm not waiting for my mother to pick me up. I'm on the back nine on Sunday, and you couldn't get a greased needle up my fanny with a sledgehammer. Well, this was the reaction both of us had. We both laughed. It was a very funny interchange. And what I really liked about it was I liked his honesty. This is an important 9 holes. I'm not waiting for my mom. You know, the back nine on Sunday with a chance to win. And I remember my brothers were there watching. And I think Jay shot, I want to say he shot 35 on the back nine, maybe finished 5th or 4th, whatever it was. And they said, why were you laughing so hard going down the 10th fairway? And I told them. So in some respects, his comment broke the ice just the way I wanted to be broken, but it really, my story didn't really resonate with him very much.
No, but you got where you wanted to. That's what I was.
Yeah, we did get to where we wanted to. And I think a lot of times I tell people that when you're caddying a tour event, you're probably asked almost 20 questions a hole. So you multiply that by 72. So you're well over 1,000 questions you're asked. And they're not multiple choice normally. And you don't have time to answer them. You can't say, well, I'll get back to you in 5 minutes. And so you really have to be unusually present. And you've had to have done all your homework and your prep work. And sometimes when you're watching a tournament, you'll see the caddy going into his yardage book on the green now when the guy's already putting. And what he's doing really is going to the next hole. And he's looking at the pin and he's looking at the, you know, how far is it going to be to the left bunker when he asked me, because you have to know that at that very moment. You can't start fumbling around looking at the yardage book and, you know, acting like you're not aware. It's a good way to get fired. And so you're kind of always on. And even that little scenario where I see Jay racing off the tee, what do? Do I don't say anything? Or,
right.
You know, in my case, I came up with some silly story, but I got out of them what I wanted to get out of them.
Billy Harmon. Welcome, Billy.
It's great to
Master
be here, guys.
storyteller.
Really good
Master
to be here.
storyteller, hopefully will tell us some great stories about the Masters.
I have a few, yes.
Thanks for joining us
Casper.
today.
Billy
We
Harmon,
really appreciate your
Double
feedback.
Indemnity,
And please
Arky,
subscribe to the
Two
show
Outer,
and hit the
Claude
bell
Harmon,
icon so you get notified
Movie
of
Classics,
new episodes.
Mark Gable,
Hit them
Odd
hard
Job,
and hit them often.
Best 36 Holes.